Okay, 4.2, we get an overview of photosynthesis. As you learned in second grade, photosynthesis is a process of turning the light energy up from the sun to make sugar. The kind of organisms that do photosynthesis are plants, and plants are producers. We would not live long without our producers, so if something happened to all our photosynthetic pals out there, then we would really have a problem. Okay, this is extremely important. Chlorophyll is the molecule that absorbs light energy. Therefore, chlorophyll is something you're going to need to be involved in the light-dependent reactions, which we'll talk about in a second. All right, if you look over here, we have a leaf and a blow-up of the cell within the leaf. You can tell it's a cell because it's got all these organelle structures in it, like the central vacuole and the chloroplast. And then we have a blow-up of the chloroplast, which is an organelle with a double membrane. See, here's the outer membrane, here's the inner membrane, and it's filled with stacks of what look like green pennies. Okay, we'll talk about the names of the various things inside the chloroplast in a second. But the reason that these green penny-looking things are green is because the membrane have chlorophyll, a pigment that picks up the light energy from the sun or whatever light is available. Okay, and so this is called the chloroplast. All right. Let's talk about the different parts of the chloroplast. Now this is a chloroplast, not a cell. This is a chloroplast. Notice the double membrane. Here's the outer membrane. Here's the inner membrane. And then we have these stacks of things that look like green pennies. Each one is called a thylakoid. So each of these discs made out of a membrane that has embedded in it the chlorophyll pigment molecule is called a thylakoid. A stack of them is called a grana. And so we've got all these grana made of thylakoids. And then you can see that the grana and thylakoids do not fill the entire chloroplast, but there's some room. That room is filled with a sort of goo we call stroma. So stroma is in between all the thylakoids. Okay? There are two sets of reactions that make up photosynthesis. The first one we'll talk about is the light-dependent reactions. Light-dependent reactions. That means light is needed for these reactions to take place. Most important, what you need to know is where do the light-dependent reactions happen? They happen on the thylakoid membrane, these little green pennies down here. They happen in the thylakoids. You need sunlight, obviously, because it's a light-dependent reaction, so you need sunlight, and you need these water molecules. Remember, water looks like a little Mickey Mouse, so I hope you can recognize that. See how the hydrogen is at a kind of angle to the oxygen. So these are water molecules. What's needed to start the light-dependent reaction is sunlight for the energy, and water is the chemical. It happens on the thylakoid membrane. And when you are finished, oxygen is released. In addition to oxygen, there are two high-energy carrying molecules, which we talked about in class. One is ATP and the other is NADPH. This energy that is created from the light-dependent reactions using the energy from the sun there's two of them, two energy carrying molecules, ATP and NADPH. All right, now we'll move on to the light-independent reactions. These end up making the sugars that photosynthesis, that's the whole point of photosynthesis. Light-independent reactions do not need light to power them, but they get their power from the products of the light-dependent reactions that we just talked about. Remember those two energy-carrying molecules, which are ATP and NADPH. All right, the light-independent reactions to make sugar happen in the stroma. Remember, the stroma is the fluid that all the thylakoids are floating in. You need to put in carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. They use that energy from the light-dependent reactions, and they make a 6-carbon sugar known as glucose. Okay. The overall equation, remember the H2O was brought in for the light-dependent reactions. The CO2 was brought in for the light-independent reactions. Overall, you make sugar, or 1 glucose, and you release oxygen molecules. Okay, what you need to know about these two reactions is where does each one take place? What is the energy source for each one? What is the chemical that goes in? What is the energy that comes out? What's the chemical that comes out? Okay, so let's go over that. For the light-dependent reactions, sunlight is your energy source. Your chemical source is water. It takes place in the thylakoid membrane, which remember has that chlorophyll, which makes it able to react to the sunlight. The products are oxygen and 2 high-energy carrying molecules. Sorry about that. 2 high-energy carrying molecules which go on to the light-independent reactions. Those are ATP and NADPH. In the light-independent reactions, your energy source, I just mentioned, comes from your light-dependent reactions, ATP and NADPH. Your chemical is carbon dioxide. It happens in the stroma. Remember, the stroma is the fluid that bathes the thylakoids. And out comes a 6-carbon sugar, and your energy is locked in the bonds between the carbons and hydrogens and oxygen. Thank you for your attention.